The Rivera family lives in fear of what would be the worst day of their lives.
I was afraid that one day they would come home and he wouldn't be here.
The day that nobody comes up and picks me up from school.
What if he just doesn't appear? What if he just doesn't come up after today?
Jenny met her husband, an undocumented immigrant from Mexico, here in this North Carolina county 18 years ago. The family asked we not show his face or share his name because they are worried he might be deported. As a high school teacher and mother of their two teenage daughters, Isabella and Mackenzie, the stakes of her husband being deported are high. Jenny says she lives in fear that her next phone call will be one saying he's been deported.
If my husband accidentally butt dials me in the middle of the day and I see his name come up on my phone, my heart just sinks. And I have to step out and answer that phone call.
Now, former President Trump is campaigning on the promise of mass deportations, invoking wartime power flaws to deport more undocumented migrants living inside the country than any president in American history.
I will invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. Think of that. That's how far back.
Though Jenny's husband does not have a criminal record, he was previously stopped at the border and sent back to Mexico, making him a possible target for deportation if stopped by ICE. North Carolina's new 287G law guarantees local law enforcement's cooperation with ICE. In a future Trump administration, that could mean the Rivera's father is more likely to be deported back to Mexico, while his U.S. citizen wife and daughters would remain behind. Their father says he lives in the shadows to stay protected.
I don't make any trouble. I just go work and coming home, pick up my kids, take it to soccer, and that's it. I live for them, and my family is everything for me.
And he's worried people would treat his children differently if they knew his status.
I think it's the last 8 years with the Trump talking about us that way it's kind of, it's like my daughter says, it's kind of a little bit difficult.
Really like a one-at-a-time kind of operation. So
we spoke to two former Trump officials who said they think the country is ready for mass deportations, even involving families. Ron Vitello served as acting director of ICE under Trump. He said the first Trump administration worked on a plan to target families for deportation. Part of the problem, Vitello said, was they were worried about how the public would respond to families being deported.
Do you think the American public is more willing to see something like that now?
I think it's necessary. I think the polling that I've seen in media and sources such as that people are ready to have that happen. Because we've got more than 10 million people that have been encountered by CBP at the border since the Biden-Harris administration took over. And so people are really kind of tired of the impact that's having.
Kamala Harris has blamed Republicans, spurred on by Trump, for blocking a bipartisan bill that she said would have secured the border if passed earlier this year. A recent Pew Research poll found more than 56% of registered voters are in favor of mass deportations of immigrants living in the country illegally. But 58% also said they were in favor of allowing undocumented immigrants married to U.S. citizens to stay. Chad Wolf served as acting Secretary of Homeland Security under Trump, though he says he does not speak for the Trump campaign now. While the Biden administration has prioritized criminals and made no effort to target families like the Riveras, Wolf said families with U.S. citizen children should not be exempted from deportation.
Do you think that families would be exempted from deportations under a future Trump administration?
Well, I don't know why you would exempt any class of individuals from the law. That just doesn't make sense to me.
We also asked him about the Rivera's daughter's fear of their father's deportation.
What would you say to her? You have children. Should she be afraid?
Well, again, the hypotheticals are very difficult. I have no idea what their background is unless there's other extenuating circumstances of some kind. You're not going to see that individual a priority for removal as, look, the end goal here is to protect Americans and protect American communities. So we want to get the worst of the worst out of those communities.
The only way the Rivera's father could apply to live legally in the United States, as the Riveras understand it, would be to leave the U.S. for 10 years.
My kids would have to live outside of the country for 10 years. or he lives outside the country for 10 years and I stay here. But when's the best 10 years for him to miss?
To his teenage daughters, losing dad is not an option at this time in their lives.
He's the one that I talk to about my day and how things are going, how my love life is going, how everything.
Julia Ainsley joins us tonight from Washington. Julia, if former President Trump is elected, do we know how these mass deportations would happen? Do we know which agency would carry them out?
The agency in charge, Tom, would be ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. But at this point, they would need 10 times their annual budget in order to carry this out. Trump has said he's going to depend largely on local police. This is state jurisdictions, local sheriffs who are somehow going to be willing to use their men and women, their time to be able to carry out these arrests. He also has said that he would invoke a 1789 Military Wartime Powers Act in order to get the military involved, although that could be a violation of the Constitution that prevents the military from arresting civilians, even if they are not U.S. citizens. So a lot of the logistics still up in the air. Also, just in terms of the amount of people that they would try to get on flights, that could mean having to vastly expand detention along the U.S.-Mexico border. They haven't put any of these plans firmly in writing yet. And in fact, people are very reluctant to say that they're speaking for the campaign on this issue, but it continues to be something the former president brings up at about every campaign rally. We've seen people holding signs at the RNC calling for mass deportations. They say they'll prioritize criminals first, Tom, but when they're looking at trying to go after over 1 million people, of course, there will be families and some without criminal records who are arrested and deported, Tom.
Okay, Julia Ainsley for us tonight. Julia, we thank you for your reporting, and we will be right back.